The turkey was in the oven when I asked my husband, Killian, if the hospital had finally sent my DNA results. He stopped setting the table, turned to me with this look I'd never seen before, and said yes, they came last week. Last week. 7 days he'd been sitting on information that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family, and he chose Thanksgiving dinner, with all 23 relatives arriving in an hour, to tell me that my father wasn't my father. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now because what I'm about to tell you gets darker and more twisted than anything you can imagine, and you're going to want to follow this story to the end. Also, tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because after hearing what happened to me, you're going to need one too. I'm Siobhan, and I'm 39 years old. Well, I was 39 years old when this happened last Thanksgiving. I'm 40 now, and I'm a completely different person. Not metaphorically. Literally, I am not the person I thought I was for 4 decades. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The DNA test wasn't my idea. It was my sister Mairead's. She'd gotten really into genealogy, one of those people who spent hours on ancestry websites building family trees and connecting with distant relatives across Ireland and America. She'd done her own DNA test and found some interesting connections, so she bought kits for the whole family last Christmas. Dad, Mum, me, my brother Fionbar, and Mairead herself. It was supposed to be fun. A way to learn more about our Irish heritage. Maybe find some cousins in Cork or Galway we didn't know about. Dad took his test in January. He died in March. Heart attack, sudden, devastating. He was only 65. 1 minute he was working in his garden, planting the tomatoes he'd never get to harvest, and the next minute he was gone. We were destroyed. Dad was the center of our family, the man who held everything together. He'd emigrated from County Clare to America in his 20s, worked construction until his hands were calloused and bent, saved every penny to buy a small house in Boston where he raised the 3 of us. He wasn't perfect, but he was ours. Or so I thought. The DNA results were delayed because of some processing backup at the lab. They said it would take 6 to 8 weeks, but then Dad died and honestly we all forgot about it. We were drowning in grief, trying to figure out how to exist in a world without him. Mum barely spoke for months. Fionbar threw himself into work. Mairead stopped her genealogy project entirely. And me, I just went numb. By November, 9 months after Dad's death, we were finally starting to surface. Not heal, but at least breathe. Mum was talking about maybe hosting Thanksgiving again like she used to when Dad was alive. Killian and I had just moved into a bigger house, so we offered to host instead. Give Mum a break. Everyone agreed. It would be good for us, we said. A way to honor Dad by keeping the family traditions going. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I got a call from the hospital. My DNA results were ready. Did I want them mailed or could I pick them up? I told them to mail them. I figured I'd look at them over the weekend, maybe after the holiday chaos died down. I wasn't in a rush. Like I said, I'd completely forgotten why we'd even done the tests in the first place. But apparently they'd already mailed them. The week before. And Killian had gotten the mail that day. And Killian had opened my results, which, okay, we're married, we open each other's mail sometimes, not a big deal. Except it was a big deal. It was the biggest deal of my entire life. So there I am, in my kitchen, flour on my hands from making Dad's traditional Irish soda bread recipe. And Killian is looking at me like I'm a stranger. What do you mean they came last week? Yes. He set down the silverware. His hands were shaking. Siobhan, I need you to sit down. I didn't sit down. I just stood there, watching his face, watching him try to figure out how to say whatever he needed to say. The oven timer was beeping. The house smelled like herbs and butter. Everything was normal except nothing was normal. Your DNA results, he started, then stopped. Started again. They show something unexpected. Like what? Am I secretly Italian or something? I was joking, trying to lighten whatever weird mood had settled over us. But he wasn't laughing. The test includes a relative matching feature, he said slowly. It shows you people who share your DNA. Close relatives, distant relatives, all of them. Okay. Your dad isn't on there. Blink. Well, yeah, Dad's results probably haven't come back yet. The lab is backed up, remember? Siobhan. He picked up a paper from the counter. The DNA report. Your dad's results came back. They sent them here too, addressed to your mom, but the envelope was in our mailbox by mistake. She must have written this address on the form instead of hers. I opened it because I thought it might be important. My heart started doing this strange stuttering thing in my chest. And your dad's DNA shows he has 2 children. Mairead and Fionbar. Not 3. 2. The kitchen tilted. I gripped the counter. That's impossible. The lab made a mistake. These tests aren't always accurate. I read about this, people get false results all the time. But even as I was saying it, I knew. Something in me knew. All those little moments from childhood that never quite made sense suddenly snapped into focus like a camera finding its focal point. The way Dad always seemed slightly distant with me, loving but separate in a way he never was with Mairead and Fionbar. The way I looked nothing like any of them. Mairead and Fionbar both had Dad's dark hair and Mum's green eyes. I was blonde, blue-eyed, tall where they were average height. We'd always joked that I was the milkman's daughter. Except apparently it wasn't a joke. There's more, Killian said quietly. The test shows you do have a match. First-degree relative. A father. Who? He showed me the name on the report. Padraig Brennan. 50% DNA match. Father. I'd never heard that name in my life. For a week, Killian had been carrying this information alone. He tried to tell me multiple times, he said later, but every time he got close, I'd start talking about Thanksgiving plans or Dad's recipes or how much I missed him. How do you tell someone their entire identity is a lie? How do you pick the moment to detonate that bomb? He'd finally decided he couldn't let it go any longer. Not with the whole family coming over. Not with Mum sitting at our table, keeping this secret she'd kept for 40 years. 'Cause Mum had to know. There was no other explanation. You can't accidentally get pregnant by someone who isn't your husband and not notice. You can't raise a child for 4 decades and not know she's not biologically your husband's daughter. My mother had lied to me for my entire life. And my father, the man who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework and walked me down the aisle at my wedding, he either never knew or he knew and loved me anyway, and I'd never get to ask him which one it was because he was dead. I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't get air into my lungs. Killian helped me to a chair, got me water, talked me through a panic attack while the turkey timer beeped and beeped and beeped in the background. What do? I finally asked when I could speak again. I don't know, he said. But we have 23 people coming here tomorrow, and your mother is one of them. We went through the options. Cancel Thanksgiving. Tell everyone I was sick. Confront Mum privately before dinner. Wait until after the holiday. Pretend I didn't know anything at all. Every option felt impossible. How do you sit across from your mother and pass her the mashed potatoes when you know she's been lying to you since before you could walk? In the end, we didn't cancel. I don't know why. Maybe because Dad would have wanted us together. Maybe because I was too shocked to make any decisions. Maybe because some part of me hoped this was all a mistake and everything would go back to normal if I just ignored it. Thanksgiving Day arrived. The house filled with family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, Fionbar and his wife Orlith, Mairead and her husband Tig and their 3 kids. And Mum, wearing Dad's favorite color, navy blue, carrying the cranberry sauce she made from his mother's recipe. I couldn't look at her. Every time I tried, my vision went blurry with rage or grief or both. Killian stayed close to me, running interference, keeping people away when he could see I was about to crack. You okay, sister? Fionbar asked at one point, giving me a hug. You look like you've seen a ghost. I nearly laughed. A ghost would have been easier. Ghosts are dead. The lies surrounding me were very much alive. Mairead cornered me in the kitchen while I was mashing the potatoes. I miss Dad, she said, tears in her eyes. This doesn't feel right without him. Yeah, I managed. It doesn't. But I'm glad we're all together. Family is everything, right? That's what Dad always said. Family is everything. The words Dad said 1,000 times. The principle he'd built his entire life around. And it was all based on a lie. Or was it? If he'd known I wasn't his biological daughter, did that make his love for me less real? If he hadn't known, did that make the lie less devastating? I made it through dinner. Have no idea how. I smiled and nodded and let people hug me and tell stories about Dad. My Aunt Nuala got drunk and cried about how much she missed her brother. My cousin Ronan gave a toast about family and legacy and staying connected to our Irish roots. And all the while I was screaming inside, wondering who I actually was, where I actually came from, whether anything I'd been told about my life was true. After dinner, after the dishes were done and the leftovers were packed and most of the family had left, Mum lingered. She was helping Killian clean the dining room when I walked in. She looked up at me and smiled. "That was lovely, Siobhan. Your father would have been so proud." Something in me snapped. "Would he?" Yes. My voice came out strange, hollow. Mum's smile faded. "Of course he would. Why would you ask that?" "I got my DNA results." The color drained from her face. She actually staggered back a step, grabbing the edge of the table for support. "Siobhan," Killian started, but I held up a hand. "You've known my whole life," I said to Mum. 40 years you've been lying to me. 40 years. I don't know what you're talking about." But her voice was shaking and she couldn't meet my eyes. "Padraig Brennan. That name mean anything to you?" She dropped into a chair like her legs had given out. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then quietly she said, "How did you find out?" "So it's true." Even though I'd known, even though the DNA test was conclusive, some part of me had been hoping for a different answer. Lab error. Mix-up. Anything but this. Mum was crying now, silent tears running down her face. "It was before your father and I were married. I was 19. Padraig was a boy from my village back in Clare. We were young and stupid and I got pregnant. My family was ashamed. His family was ashamed. Everyone said I'd ruined my life." "Did Dad know?" She shook her head. "I met your father, Lorcan, a few months after I found out I was pregnant. He was visiting Ireland, working construction for the summer. He was kind. He was leaving for America. And when I told him I was pregnant, he said he'd marry me anyway. He said the baby would be his, and we'd never speak of it again. He knew." The relief was overwhelming. Dad had known. He'd chosen me anyway. "He knew, and he loved you more than anything in this world," Mum said fiercely. "You were his daughter, Siobhan. Biology doesn't change that. He raised you. He loved you. He was your father in every way that matters. But not in the way that's written in my DNA." I was crying too now. "I don't even know who I am. I don't know where I come from. Half of my genetics, half of me, is from a complete stranger. Padraig wasn't a stranger. He was a good boy. He wanted to marry me, but our families wouldn't allow it. His parents sent him away to England, and I never saw him again. Last I heard he'd moved to America too, somewhere in New York. And you never thought to tell me this. Never thought I might want to know where I came from. Who I came from. I thought I was protecting you," Mum said. "Your father, Lorcan, he was adamant. He said if anyone ever knew, they'd treat you differently. They'd see you as less than Mairead and Fianbar. He wanted you to have a normal life, to feel like you belonged. Well, congratulations, I felt like I belonged to a lie." The words came out harsher than I'd intended. Mum flinched like I'd struck her. Killian put a hand on my arm, a gentle warning, but I shook it off. "Do Mairead and Fianbar know?" "Yes." "No. No one knows. Just me and your father. And now you. And now me," I repeated. "Great. So now I get to carry this secret too. Now I get to lie to my siblings about who I am." "You're their sister," Mum insisted. "That hasn't changed." But it had changed. Everything had changed. The foundation I'd built my entire identity on had cracked wide open, and I was falling through the fissure into an abyss where nothing made sense anymore. Mum left that night broken. Killian and I didn't speak. We just cleaned in silence, putting away the last of the Thanksgiving dinner, the holiday that was supposed to bring us together and instead had torn my world apart. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Dad. About the man who'd raised me, who'd chosen to be my father even though he didn't have to. About the sacrifice he'd made, keeping that secret, protecting me from judgment and questions. About the love that must have taken. But I also thought about Padraig Brennan, the man whose DNA I carried. The man whose face I might have inherited, whose height, whose blue eyes. Did he ever think about me? Did he know I existed? Did he have other children, siblings I'd never met, relatives who might look like me? At 3 a.m, I got up and logged into the DNA testing website. I found Padraig Brennan's profile. The site showed his information, basic details he'd chosen to make public. He was 70 years old. He lived in Manhattan. And his profile picture showed a tall, blonde, blue-eyed man who could have been my reflection in 30 years, if I were a man. There was a messaging feature. Could contact him. I could send him a message saying, "Hi, I'm your daughter. The one you probably don't know about. The one who was raised by another man. The one who just found out her entire life is built on secrets and lies." My finger hovered over the button. Then I closed the laptop. The next few weeks were torture. I went through my days on autopilot, going to work, coming home, pretending everything was normal when nothing was normal. Killian tried to talk to me about it, tried to get me to process what I was feeling, but I couldn't. I was too angry. Mom for lying. At Dad for dying before I could ask him about it. At the universe for dropping this bomb on me when I was least equipped to handle it. I avoided family gatherings. When Mairead called to suggest we all get together for Fionbar's birthday, I made excuses. When Mum tried to visit, I was suddenly very busy. I couldn't look at any of them without feeling like a fraud. But I kept going back to that DNA website. I kept looking at Padraig Brennan's profile. And finally, 2 weeks before Christmas, I sent him a message. It was simple, direct. "My name is Siobhan McCarthy. I believe you knew my mother, Niamh O'Sullivan, in Ireland in the early 1980s. My DNA test shows you're my biological father. I'd like to talk if you're willing." I didn't expect a response. Or maybe I expected anger, denial, a demand to leave him alone. What I got was worse. I got immediate acceptance. "Siobhan," he wrote back within hours. "I've been hoping you'd contact me. I saw your name pop up as a DNA match months ago. I've been waiting, wondering if you knew if you'd reach out. I would very much like to talk. Can we meet?" He'd known. For months, he'd known about me and said nothing. He'd been waiting for me to make the first move, respecting whatever life I'd built, whatever story I'd been told. The consideration in that gesture broke something loose in my chest. We arranged to meet between Christmas and New Year's. Padraig offered to come to Boston, but I said I'd go to New York. I needed to do this on my own terms, on neutral territory, somewhere I could leave if it became too much. I didn't tell Mom I was going. I told Killian, and he offered to come with me, but I said no. This was something I needed to do alone. The train ride to Manhattan felt endless. I kept rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd act, but every scenario I imagined felt wrong. How do you meet your father for the first time when you're 40 years old? What do you say to the man who gave you half your DNA but none of your memories? We met at a coffee shop in Midtown. I got there early, ordered a coffee I couldn't drink, and waited. And then he walked in, and it was like looking at a masculine version of myself. Same height, same build, same eyes. The resemblance was uncanny. How had no one ever questioned it? How had I gone my whole life not knowing I looked nothing like the man I called Dad? "Siobhan," Padraig said, and his voice cracked. "God, you look just like my mother." We sat. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two strangers connected by the most fundamental bond and separated by 40 years of silence. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I'm so sorry. If I'd known about you, I would have been there. I would have fought for you. You didn't know. I'd assumed he'd known and walked away. That Mom had told him, and he'd chosen not to be involved. He shook his head. Niamh's parents sent her away before she started showing. They told me she'd moved to Dublin, that she didn't want to see me anymore. I was devastated. I loved her. I wanted to marry her. My parents said I was too young, that I needed to forget about her and move on with my life. So they sent me to England. I got a job, tried to build a new life. Eventually I moved here to New York. I married, had 2 daughters, got divorced. Lived a perfectly ordinary life, never knowing I had another daughter. When did you find out? Last year. I did the DNA test because my daughters were interested in genealogy. And there you were. Siobhan McCarthy. 50% match. Daughter. I nearly had a heart attack. He laughed, but there were tears in his eyes. I did some digging. Found out Niamh had emigrated to America, married a man named Lorcan McCarthy, had 3 children. I assumed you knew about me, that you'd been raised knowing you had 2 fathers, and if you hadn't reached out, it meant you didn't want contact. I was respecting what I thought was your choice. We talked for 4 hours. He told me about his life, his career as an architect, his daughters Aoife and Roisin, who were my half-sisters, his love of sailing and Irish music and terrible puns. I told him about growing up in Boston, about Lorcan, about the family I'd known, about learning the truth. Do you hate her? He asked at one point. Your mother, for not telling you. I've been asking myself the same question for weeks. I don't know. I'm angry. But I also understand why she did it. Things were different then. The shame of having a child out of wedlock, the pressure from family. And Lorcan, he gave us all a good life. He was a good father. He was your father, Padraig said firmly. I may have contributed DNA, but he did the work. He earned the title. I'll never try to take that from his memory. Something about that statement, the generosity of it, made me start crying. Just completely broke down in the middle of a Manhattan coffee shop, sobbing like a child. And Padraig, this man I just met, this stranger who was my father, put his arm around me and held me while I grieved for the father I'd lost and the identity that had been stolen and the years that could never be recovered. We exchanged numbers. He gave me his address, invited me to visit any time, said his daughters would love to meet their sister. He showed me pictures of them and I could see the resemblance there too. We shared the same smile. On the train back to Boston I felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but less fractured. Meeting Padraig hadn't erased the betrayal or the confusion, but it had given me context. It had shown me that the story was more complicated than lies and secrets. It was also about love and sacrifice and people doing the best they could with impossible situations. When I got home, Cillian was waiting. How was it? He asked. Strange. Terrible. All of it. I pulled him close. He's a good man. Dad would have liked him. Are you going to tell Mairead and Fianbar? That was the question I'd been avoiding. My siblings still didn't know. They were going through life thinking we shared both parents, not knowing that I was only half related to them. Did they have a right to know? Did I have a right to keep it from them? I don't know, I said honestly. Mum made me promise not to tell them. She's terrified it'll tear the family apart. But it's your story, Cillian said. Not hers. You get to decide who knows and when. He was right. This was my information to share or keep. But the thought of telling them, of watching their faces as they processed the news, of potentially damaging our relationships, made me sick. In the end I made a compromise. I told them. But not about Padraig. Not yet. I told them that I'd learned Dad wasn't my biological father, that Mum had gotten pregnant before she married him, that Dad had known and loved me anyway. I framed it as a testament to Dad's character, to the kind of man he was, that he'd chosen to raise another man's daughter as his own. Mairead cried. Fianbar was stunned. But neither of them treated me differently. If anything, they hugged me tighter. You're still our sister, Mairead said fiercely. Nothing changes that. And she was right. DNA doesn't make a family. Love does. Sacrifice does. Showing up day after day, year after year, building a life together. That's what makes a family. Dad had taught me that, even if he'd taught it through a complicated truth. I started seeing Podrick regularly. Once a month I'd take the train to New York and we'd have dinner or go to a museum or just walk through Central Park talking. I met Aoife and Roisin, who welcomed me with open arms and endless questions. I learned about my Irish heritage from Podrick's side, different stories and traditions than the ones I'd grown up with. I was building a relationship with my biological father while honoring the memory of the man who raised me. It wasn't simple. There were hard days when I resented everyone involved for not giving me the truth sooner. There were moments when I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. There were family gatherings where I felt like an outsider in my own life. But there were also moments of grace. Like when Mum finally apologized, really apologized, not for the circumstances of my birth but for keeping the truth from me for so long. Like when Podrick told me he wished he'd known about me from the beginning but was grateful to know me now. Like when Cillian held my hand and reminded me that who I am isn't determined by who my parents are, but by the choices I make and the life I build. It's been almost a year now since that Thanksgiving when my world imploded. I'm still figuring out what it means, this new understanding of my identity. I'm still processing the grief and anger and confusion. But I'm also grateful. Grateful for Lorcan, who loved me unconditionally. Grateful for Podrick, who welcomed me into his life without hesitation. Grateful for Cillian, who stood by me through the worst of it. Grateful for my siblings, who proved that family is about more than genetics. Last month, Podrick came to Boston for the first time. I introduced him to Mum. It was awkward and emotional and strange, these two people who'd loved each other 40 years ago, seeing each other again as completely different people. But there was also closure in it. They got to have the conversation they never had back then, to release each other from old guilt and old what-ifs. And this Thanksgiving we're doing something different. Mairead is hosting and she's invited everyone. Mum, Fianbar and his family, me and Cillian. And for the first time, Podrick and his daughters. Two families, merged by truth and DNA and the messy, complicated reality of human relationships. I don't know how it'll go. I don't know if it'll be healing or just more complicated. But I'm going. Because that's what family does. We show up even when it's hard. We sit at the table together, even when we're still figuring out where everyone fits. We break bread and share stories and try to build something good from the broken pieces. Dad always said family is everything. I used to think he meant the family you're born into, the blood ties that bind you. Now I understand he meant something bigger. Family is the people who choose you. People who stay. The people who love you even when the truth is complicated and the path forward is unclear. I am Siobhan McCarthy, daughter of Lorcan McCarthy, who raised me with patience and pride. Daughter of Podrick Brennan, who gave me half my DNA and all his enthusiasm for terrible puns. Sister to Mairead and Fianbar and Aoife and Roisin. Wife to Cillian, who saw me through the worst revelation of my life. I am the product of secrets and sacrifice, of love and lies, of two men, one who raised me and one who gave me life, both claiming me in their own way. I am Irish and American, McCarthy and Brennan, the girl who thought she knew her story and the woman who's still writing it. And I am grateful. For the truth finally. For the pain that led to understanding. For the family that's messier and bigger and more complicated than I ever imagined, but also more resilient. This Thanksgiving, I'll sit at a table surrounded by people who share my DNA and people who don't, people who've known me my whole life and people I'm just getting to know. And I'll be thankful for all of it. The easy parts and the hard parts. The lies that protected me and the truth that freed me. Because in the end, we're all just trying to find where we belong. And sometimes the answer is more complicated and more beautiful than we ever could have imagined.